lost my mind to
Good
cover.
morning, St. John's. It is Monday, the 12th of July, and that means it's time for our collective worship with me, Mr. Vore. Today, we're going to be thinking about trust. 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 Now, trust is one of our school values. It's one of our living values. And I was trying to think about some of the people that I trust. I realise that there are quite a lot of people. I trust my dad. I trust my wife, Mrs. Ball. But I also trust Monty, and that made me realise that I trust different people for different things. So before I start reading our story for today, I'd like to ask you a few questions. And for each question, I would like you to think and to say, just quietly, so that only you can hear, the name of somebody who meets this question. The first one is, who would you trust to cheer you up if you were feeling upset? Secondly, who would you trust with a secret? I wonder if they're the same person. Okay, next. Who would you trust to keep you safe? Who would you trust to always love you no matter what? Who would you trust with your most treasured possession? That thing that you could not live without. And lastly, who would you trust with your very life? Now, if you're anything like me, you were able to think of a few different people for some of those, but you probably didn't have the same name for absolutely all of them. Now, I'm going to read a story today all about trust. And this story takes place just after the miracle where Jesus fed 5,000 people with just a couple of baskets of food. And it says this: immediately, Jesus told his followers to get into the boat and go ahead of him across the lake. He stayed there to send the 5,000 people home. After he'd sent them away, he went up by himself into the hills to pray. It was late, and Jesus was there alone. By this time, the boat was already far away from land. It was being hit by waves because the wind was blowing against it. Between 3 and 6 o'clock in the morning, Jesus came to them, walking on the water. When his followers saw him walking on the water, they were afraid. They said, "It's a ghost!" and cried out in fear. But Jesus quickly spoke to them. "Have courage. It is I. Do not be afraid." Peter said, "Lord, if it is really you, then command me to come to you on the water." Wow, what a lot of trust Peter was placing in Jesus to say, if it's really you and you can walk on the water, then I trust that I could do the same. Jesus said, "Come on then." And Peter left the boat and walked on the water to Jesus. But when Peter saw the wind and the waves, he became afraid and began to sink. He shouted, "Lord, save me!" Immediately, Jesus reached out his hand and caught Peter. Jesus said, "Your faith is small. Why did you doubt?" After they got into the boat, the wind became calm. Now, when I read this story, I feel a little bit sorry for Peter, because I don't think I'd even be brave enough to say to Jesus, "Call me out if it's you." But did you notice when Peter began to stop trusting? Jesus didn't change, but he noticed the things that were scary, and suddenly he didn't know if he could trust Jesus anymore. Luckily For us, that is not the end of the story, because if I jump forwards a few months, something else happened. Jesus had been sadly killed on the cross, and then he had come back to life again, and he was sitting on the beach having some breakfast with the very same Peter who we saw in this story. And when Jesus saw Peter, he didn't say, "Do you remember that time when you didn't trust me?" He said something else. He told Peter to look after his people. So in this story, Peter started not sure if he could trust Jesus or not. But by the end, Jesus was trusting him with a really important mission. Now, we've only got a week and a half left at St. John's for this year before you start your next journey and your next adventure in your new class. And there will be times when you start to worry in your new class, when suddenly your friendships aren't as strong as they used to be, or the work becomes harder than you hoped. But when those winds and those waves come, my question for you is, who can I trust? And my second challenge is not only for you to be able to trust others, but just like Jesus trusted Peter at the end, can you become somebody who is trusted by others? How can we show that we care and will not let others down? That's why trust is such an important value in our school, and why I am confident that even though Mr. Bohr and Mrs. Bohr won't be there next year to see this happen, I'm confident that you are going to grow to become people who can trust others and who can be trustworthy themselves. I believe in you, and I trust that you can do it. That's all for this week. I'd love somebody in your class to say a prayer for your learning this week. But until next time, it's goodbye from me.